That night, I realized a wedding could tear two families apart forever. My name is Lydia Monroe, and I'm 58 years old. I'm a mother of two, but this story centers on my youngest son, Caleb. The day he married should have been filled with joy and celebration. It wasn't. I can still smell the fresh orchids lining the aisle, their sweet perfume mixing with the faint wax of candles, see the soft glow of string lights overhead twinkling like distant stars, and hear the murmurs of guests as they took their seats, programs rustling in their hands. Caleb stood at the altar in his charcoal gray suit, the one he'd picked out with such care after trying on half a dozen others. He was anxious but beaming, his fingers fidgeting with his cufflinks. I felt a swell of pride that warmed me from the inside out until the reception toasts began. The bride's mother, Mrs. Evelyn Whitaker, stepped up to the microphone. She was a poised woman with a sharp gaze that could cut glass, the head of a prominent real estate firm. Everyone admired her, or at least they pretended to. She lifted her glass, the champagne catching the light, and said, "I'd like to raise a toast to my daughter Amelia. She's always been so determined, even as a little girl." There were light chuckles, polite and scattered. Then she turned her eyes on Caleb and added, "And today she's chosen to marry this young man." The room filled with awkward laughter, but she wasn't done. She locked eyes with my son, her smile thin and calculated, and declared, "That fool doesn't deserve her." The laughter exploded, loud and cruel, echoing off the high ceilings, but I saw Caleb's face drain of color, his jaw tightening as his fists clenched at his sides, his shoulders slumping just a fraction. No one else seemed to care. They clinked glasses as if publicly shaming a groom on his wedding day was amusing. I gripped the edge of my table, the linen napkin twisting in my fingers, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and in that instant, I knew I couldn't let it stand, because I had secrets on her, secrets she believed were buried deep, locked away where no one would ever find them, and that night, I was going to bring them all to light. If my story resonates with you, the kind where betrayal cuts deep but strength rises from it, subscribe to the channel and join me for more like this. You're not alone in these moments. But before I dive into what unfolded that evening, let me take you back to how it all started. This didn't begin at the wedding. It began months earlier with a nagging instinct that whispered in the quiet hours, "Lydia, dig deeper into that woman." It was a voice I couldn't ignore, one born from years of watching people hide behind smiles, and I listened. What I uncovered shattered her world entirely. When Caleb first mentioned he'd met a girl, I was overjoyed. It was a crisp February afternoon, snow dusting the ground outside my kitchen window like powdered sugar, the cold seeping through the glass despite the heater humming steadily. We were sipping herbal tea, steam curling up from our mugs in lazy spirals, our usual ritual after he stopped by from work. "Mom, her name is Amelia," he said, his eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, that pure, unguarded spark. "She's incredible, kind, ambitious, and she gets my humor." I studied him, noticing the subtle flush on his cheeks, the way he traced the rim of his cup absent-mindedly. Caleb was 30, a software developer at a mid-sized tech company. He was my youngest, the thoughtful one, always putting others first, the boy who'd bring home stray cats and nurse injured birds back to health. He'd dated casually before, but never like this, never with this quiet certainty. "What does she do?" I asked, warming my hands on my mug, feeling the heat seep into my palms. "She's finishing her master's in business. Her mom runs a big real estate agency, Whitaker Properties." That name, Whitaker, rang a faint bell, stirring some distant memory of newspaper headlines or neighborhood gossip, but I couldn't pinpoint why. A tiny knot formed in my stomach, the kind that comes from experience rather than reason. "Have you spent much time with her?" "Yeah, about 4 months now. I want you to meet her. How about dinner here next weekend?" I nodded, smiling outwardly because seeing my son happy was everything, a balm after the worries of raising him alone. But as he left, bundling up against the wind, a subtle unease settled in my chest, heavy and persistent, like a shadow I couldn't shake. The following Saturday, Amelia arrived right on time, the doorbell chiming softly through the house. She was striking, wavy auburn hair catching the porch light, a warm smile that reached her eyes, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans that spoke of quiet confidence rather than show. She handed me a bouquet of daisies, their fresh, clean scent filling the entryway, and hugged me lightly, her embrace genuine but tentative. "Mrs. Monroe, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me." I made lasagna, Caleb's favorite, the cheese bubbling golden in the oven, filling the kitchen with rich, comforting aromas, and we chatted over dinner, forks clinking against plates. She shared her passion for sustainable development, how she dreamed of creating eco-friendly communities that families could afford without sacrificing beauty or safety. Her voice lit up as she described green roofs and community gardens, and I warmed to her, seeing the sincerity in her gestures, the way she leaned forward when excited. But when talk turned to her family, her tone shifted, her fork pausing mid-air as she poked at her salad. "My mom's intense," she admitted, her gaze dropping to her plate. "She's always pushed me to excel, to surround myself with the right people." "And what does she think of Caleb?" I asked gently, pouring her more water, watching the ice cubes clink softly. Amelia hesitated, glancing at him with a mix of love and worry, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. "I haven't introduced them yet. Mom's particular about who I date. She says success is everything, that I need someone who matches our lifestyle." A chill ran through me, sharper than the winter draft sneaking under the door. "Caleb comes from a solid family," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the rising protectiveness, "one built on hard work and integrity. That's priceless." Amelia's eyes softened, glistening slightly in the warm kitchen light. "I know, that's why I love him." Caleb squeezed her hand across the table, his thumb brushing her knuckles reassuringly, and I forced a smile, the kind that hides the storm brewing inside. But inwardly, I sensed trouble brewing like thunder on the horizon. Evelyn Whitaker sounded like the type who measured worth in dollars and square footage, not character or heart. I'd encountered her kind before. They always concealed flaws beneath their polished exteriors, cracks hidden under layers of perfection. As the months rolled on, Caleb and Amelia grew closer, their bond deepening like roots taking hold in fertile soil. He came home humming tunes under his breath, his face glowing with a contentment that made my heart ache with joy. "Mom, Amelia supports me completely. She doesn't care about fancy things. She wants to build a future together, brick by brick." I was glad, truly, watching him flourish, but Evelyn lingered in my thoughts like a persistent fog, clouding the happiness. One evening, as spring rain pattered steadily against the porch roof, a soothing rhythm that usually calmed me, Caleb arrived looking troubled, his brow furrowed, shoulders hunched against more than just the weather. We sat there, the air cool and damp, droplets glistening on the railing. "Mom, I'm planning to propose." My heart leapt with excitement, then tightened with that familiar dread. "Have you met her family?" "Yeah, dinner at their place last week." "How was it?" He shifted uncomfortably on the wicker chair, rain dripping from the eaves. "Her mom grilled me, asked about my job, savings, if I own a home." "And?" "I was honest. I make a decent living, but no house yet. I'm saving." He paused, staring at the darkening sky. "She said, 'My daughter expects a certain level of security. Not every man can provide that.'" I felt a surge of protectiveness, hot and fierce, rising in my chest. What did Amelia say? She defended me, told her mom I was more than enough. Evelyn had laughed it off, a sharp sound that echoed in Caleb's retelling, saying, "Time will tell, dear." That night, sleep evaded me, the rain tapping insistently on the window pane. Evelyn's words echoed like a warning bell, tolling in the quiet darkness. She wasn't just skeptical, she was dismissive, judging my son as inadequate, and something deep inside told me she harbored her own hypocrisies, shadows she kept carefully concealed. Caleb proposed in May on a sunset hike, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, wildflowers blooming along the trail. Amelia accepted, tears streaming down her face, her laughter mixing with joyful sobs. He called me ecstatic, his voice breathless over the phone. "Mom, she said yes, we're engaged." I congratulated them, my words warm and sincere, but alone later, staring at the ceiling and the dim bedroom light, the fan whirring softly overhead, I whispered to the empty room, "That woman will sabotage this. I feel it in my bones." And my intuition, honed by years of quiet observation, proved right. A week later, Amelia visited me alone, knocking softly on the door, her eyes puffy from crying, cheeks flushed against the warming spring air. "Mrs. Monroe, my mom says she won't support the marriage." I brewed her some peppermint tea, the minty steam rising comforting and sharp, and listened as we sat at the kitchen table, sunlight filtering through the curtains. "She calls Caleb average, says he'll drag me down, that I'll regret settling." Her voice cracked, hands trembling around the mug. "And you?" "I love him, but Mom's so controlling. My dad's always backed her up, nodding along silently." I held her shoulders gently, feeling the tension in her muscles. "If this is real, stand your ground. Her opinion doesn't define your happiness." Amelia nodded, resolve hardening in her tear-streaked face, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She confronted Evelyn that night, insisting on the wedding despite the threats. Evelyn relented outwardly, her agreement clipped and cold over the phone, but I knew better. Women like her didn't yield graciously. They plotted in the shadows, waiting for the perfect strike. Wedding planning commenced amid a flurry of calls and emails. Caleb wanted to contribute meaningfully, his pride evident in the way he pored over budgets late into the evenings. But Evelyn insisted on handling it all, her voice commanding during a family video call. "The ceremony will be at the lakeside venue," she declared, the screen showing her impeccable home office behind her. "I'll cover costs, but on my terms. Elegance, sophistication." Caleb confided in me later, frustration etching his features as we walked in the park, leaves rustling underfoot. "Mom, it feels off. I don't want her money dictating everything, making me feel small." "Compromise for Amelia," I advised, though my words tasted bitter, the breeze carrying the scent of blooming lilacs. But I refused to compromise my suspicions. Evelyn hid something. I could sense it, like a storm gathering on a clear day. One rainy afternoon, gray clouds heavy overhead, while running errands at a local mall, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly, I spotted Evelyn through a store window. She was with a man, not her husband, and a teenage girl, their laughter light and intimate as they shared an ice cream cone. The man kissed her cheek lingeringly, the girl calling her mom with easy affection, tugging at her arm. My blood ran cold, freezing me in place amid the crowd. I ducked behind a display of scarves, heart hammering, paid for my items with shaking hands, and hurried to my car. Sitting there, rain drumming relentlessly on the roof, wipers swishing back and forth, I decided I would uncover the truth. If Evelyn was living a double life, betraying everyone around her, my son was stepping into a web of deception, and I wouldn't stand for it, not for one more day. Sleep became fitful for days, tossing in tangled sheets, the rain's memory haunting me. I'd replay the scene endlessly, Evelyn's arm linked with the man's, the adoring gaze upward, the casual intimacy that spoke of years, not moments. Then I'd think of Evelyn's husband, Mr. Harlan Whitaker, whom I'd met briefly at an engagement gathering, quiet, unassuming, always in her shadow, his smiles polite but strained. And Amelia, so eager for her mother's approval, chasing a love that seemed forever just out of reach. Did she know? I doubted it deeply, the thought twisting like a knife. But I needed facts, solid and irrefutable, not assumptions born of instinct. Accusing without evidence would backfire spectacularly, alienating Caleb and shattering the fragile peace. I hired a private detective, recommended by an old neighbor who'd navigated similar heartache years ago. His name was Victor Klein, operating from a nondescript office above a bookstore downtown. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight as I ascended one Wednesday morning, the air thick with the scent of old paper and dust, faint coffee lingering from below. I knocked, and a gruff voice invited me in. Victor was in his late 40s, stocky build, with a no-nonsense demeanor softened by tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "What brings you here, ma'am?" I explained everything, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. My son's engagement, Evelyn's disdain dripping from every interaction, the mall sighting that had turned my world upside down. I need proof if she's hiding another family. Victor jotted notes efficiently on a yellow pad, his pen scratching softly. "Got a photo?" I pulled up one from her company's website on my phone. Evelyn at a ribbon cutting, all polished smiles and power suit. "Saw her at the Evergreen Mall last Friday around 2 p.m. with a man and a girl." He nodded thoughtfully. "Give me 10 days. I'll tail her, dig into records, public and otherwise. Cost is $4,500 upfront plus expenses." It stung my savings, a sharp pinch in my chest as I wrote the check, but Caleb's future, his happiness untainted by lies, was worth every penny and more. That period was pure agony, days stretching endlessly. Caleb visited often, buzzing with excitement about invitations and cake tastings, spreading samples across my table. "Mom, we're going with lavender accents, Amelia's choice, subtle and romantic." I nodded enthusiastically, tasting the frosting with forced delight, masking my inner turmoil that churned like a storm. What if my findings imploded everything we'd built? What if Amelia shattered irreparably? But Evelyn's words to Caleb, "Not every man can provide that," fueled my determination, a fire that burned away doubt. She judged him harshly while potentially hiding far worse, her hypocrisy a bitter pill. Victor called on the 9th day, his voice clipped over the line. "Mrs. Monroe, come in, got results." I rushed over, heart racing, tires splashing through puddles from overnight rain. He slid a thick folder across his cluttered desk, papers rustling. "Evelyn Whitaker has a secret life." Photos spilled out like accusations. Evelyn entering a modest condo in a suburb 40 miles away, the door clicking shut behind her, kissing the man passionately in a parked car, picking up the girl from soccer practice, her ponytail swinging. The man kissed her cheek lingeringly, the girl calling her mom with easy affection, tugging at her arm. My blood ran cold, freezing me in place amid the crowd. I ducked behind a display of scarves, heart hammering, paid for my items with shaking hands, and hurried to my car. Sitting there, rain drumming relentlessly on the roof, wipers swishing back and forth, I decided I would uncover the truth. If Evelyn was living a double life, betraying everyone around her, my son was stepping into a web of deception, and I wouldn't stand for it, not for one more day. My hands shook as I flipped pages, the paper cool and crisp. Evelyn owed the IRS $450,000 in back taxes from 2023, notices stamped urgently. Projects stalled midway, employees jumping ship amid whispers. She's funneling company funds to her secret family while preaching about standards and worth. Victor handed me duplicates carefully. What now? "I need time," I whispered, my voice barely above the hum of his old computer fan. He warned gravely, "Men and women like her fight dirty when cornered. Be careful." I left with the evidence tucked away securely, wandering the streets as dusk fell gently, streetlights flickering on one by one, vendors packing up their carts with metallic clangs. The air cooled, carrying the distant scent of food trucks. I thought deeply of Caleb's unbridled joy, Amelia's quiet vulnerability in seeking approval, Harlan's obliviousness that now seemed tragic. Evelyn's arrogance, I realized, masked desperation, a crumbling facade held together by lies. I hid the folder in my attic that night, under old quilts that smelled of lavender sachets, vowing silence until absolutely necessary. If she humiliated Caleb again, publicly or privately, I'd strike without hesitation. The weeks blurred into silent torment, each day a careful performance. I attended dress fittings, the fabric swishing softly as Amelia twirled, tasted menus with polite nods amid clinking silverware, all while carrying this weight like an invisible chain around my neck. Sleep evaded me most nights. I'd sit up in bed, the house creaking in the quiet, poring over the documents by lamplight, transfer receipts like one from 11/15/2024 for $5,600 to G. Reed, personal, the numbers glaring accusingly. Evelyn's facade cracked further in my mind, revealing the desperation beneath her polished veneer. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in soft purples, Amelia phoned, her voice hesitant. "Mrs. Monroe, can we meet? It's about Mom." We met at a cozy diner, rain streaking the windows in rivulets, the scent of fresh coffee and fried onions comforting. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, twisting a napkin nervously. "Mom's dictating the guest list, only influential people, connections that matter. She called your relatives ordinary, said they wouldn't fit the image." Rage bubbled hot inside me, my coffee cup warming my tightening grip. "This is your wedding, not hers, not some business networking event." Amelia sighed deeply, her breath fogging the window briefly. "She threatened to pull funding if I push back. We can't afford it otherwise. It would take years to save." "Do it simply, with love, and the people who truly care." Amelia's eyes welled again, tears glistening in the diner's warm light. My heart ached sharply. She was chained by unmet affection, a longing I'd seen in my own mirror years ago. Later that night, alone, reviewing the folder under the attic's single bulb, dust motes dancing in the beam, I saw Evelyn's double life clearly, stark and undeniable. Revealing it pre-wedding would crush Amelia utterly, steal her joy at the worst moment. I'd wait for the opportune moment, no matter how the secret burned inside me. 3 weeks before the wedding, a rehearsal dinner at the Whitakers' sprawling estate, the driveway lit by elegant lanterns swaying in the breeze. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, opulence screaming excess in every gilded detail. Harlan greeted me warmly at the door, his handshake firm but his eyes distant. Evelyn's smile was icy, calculated, as she air-kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp and expensive. Caleb and Amelia seemed tense, holding hands tightly under the table. During appetizers, delicate canapés on silver trays, Evelyn toasted casually, "To my daughter, who's always aimed high." She eyed Caleb pointedly, and to her choice, humble as it is. The dig landed like a slap across the richly set table, silverware pausing mid-air. Caleb stiffened beside me. I seethed inwardly, heat rising to my face. Dinner droned on with Evelyn boasting endlessly about deals closed, voices echoing in the vast dining room. "Just closed a $4.2 million property flip, pure ambition and vision." I thought bitterly of her mounting debts, the lies propping up her empire. Post-meal, as coffee was served in delicate china cups steaming fragrantly, she pulled me aside to her study, leather-bound books lining walls they'd likely never opened, a massive oak desk dominating the space. She closed the heavy door with a soft click. "Mrs. Monroe, let's be frank." She towered over me as I sat, her shadow falling long in the lamplight. "Caleb's decent, but he's not enough for Amelia. No assets, no prestige, no real drive." I rose slowly, my knees protesting faintly. He's honest, something money can't buy, something your world seems to lack. She laughed coldly, the sound brittle in the quiet room. Honesty doesn't fund lifestyles or ambitions. I'll support them post-wedding since he can't. Remember who's calling the shots here. I met her gaze unflinchingly, my voice low but steady. I see exactly who's pretending to hold power. I left the study, fury simmering like a pot about to boil over, the hallway's cool air a brief relief. Caleb noticed my agitation in the car ride home, streetlights streaking past. "Mom, everything okay? You seem tense." "Just weary, sweetheart," I replied, forcing calm into my tone. But inwardly, the plot solidified. The wedding would be her undoing if she dared strike again, her arrogance her own trap. As the big day neared, tension coiled tighter. Victor updated me discreetly over coffee in his office. More dirt. Evelyn skimmed $750,000 from a client trust fund in 2023, case number TX47928, under quiet investigation by the state board. Arrest imminent within months, sources say. Fresh photos showed her with Gavin, time-stamped 06/22/25 at 8:45 p.m. in a dimly lit restaurant, while she'd claimed business meetings to Harlan. Harlan likely suspected nothing, his quiet demeanor now reading as willful blindness. I confided in a friend, Sandra, a family attorney I'd known for decades. In her cozy office, sunlight slanting through blinds amid stacks of legal tomes smelling of aged paper, I showed the folder, pages spreading across her desk. "This is damning, Lydia, explosive." "Only if she humiliates Caleb again," Sandra advised thoughtfully. "Have backups, multiple copies, perhaps witnesses if possible." I prepared envelopes that night, one each for Caleb, Amelia, Harlan, the paper heavy in my hands. Copies ready, sealed with resolve. The night before, Caleb dined with me at home, the kitchen warm with the scent of roasted chicken. "Mom, tomorrow's it." He was jittery, pacing slightly, excitement and nerves warring in his eyes. "Evelyn wants a lengthy toast, says she has key insights to share." Confirmation hit like a cold wave. She'd attack publicly. After he left, hugging me tightly at the door, I stared at the envelopes on the table for hours, lamplight casting long shadows, questioning deeply. Am I doing the right thing? The doubt gnawed, but recalling her slights, her cold superiority, I steeled myself. Justice, raw and necessary, demanded action. No more silence. The wedding day broke sunny and bright, golden light flooding my bedroom. I arrived early at the chapel, orchids perfuming the air sweetly, mingling with incense from morning services. Caleb paced in a back room, suit jacket draped over a chair. "Mom, your presence calms me like it always has." I hugged him fiercely, inhaling his new cologne mixed with nervous energy. "No matter what, I'm here, always." The ceremony was lovely, Amelia in ivory lace gliding down the aisle, Evelyn escorting her with feigned pride, chest puffed, vows exchanged softly, rings slipping on with trembling fingers. But tension loomed beneath the beauty, an undercurrent I alone felt acutely. The reception at the lakeside venue, elegant tables draped in white, live band tuning softly, 250 guests mingling, worlds collided visibly, Evelyn's elite circle in designer finery versus our modest kin in heartfelt best. Dinner passed smoothly, laughter rising with wine, then toasts. The MC announced Evelyn, my pulse racing like thunder. She ascended gracefully, glass raised high. To Amelia, my shining star, who could have anyone. Dramatic pause, but she picked Caleb. Laughter rippled, a simple man from simple roots. Caleb paled visibly, grip tightening on his fork. Stubborn girl insisting on this? More chuckles, sharper now. Then, staring directly, that fool doesn't deserve her, but love blinds us all. The room roared approvingly. Caleb trembled, Amelia whispered frantic comforts. Evelyn basked in her power. I rose slowly, legs shaking but resolve ironclad, striding to the stage amid widening eyes. Mrs. Whittaker, my turn. Silence fell heavy, like a blanket smothering sound. I seized the mic firmly. I'm Lydia Monroe, Caleb's mother. Moments ago, Evelyn called my son a fool on his wedding day. Gasps echoed. He's no fool, he's honorable, true. But you, Evelyn, you're the deceiver. Her face twisted in shock and rage. How dare you? With proof, undeniable. I brandished documents high, papers rustling. You've hidden a second family, Gavin Reed and daughter Haley, 15. Murmurs erupted like waves. Photos, transfers, $3,200 monthly from Whittaker Properties, receipt dated 04/05/2025. Harlan stood abruptly, ashen and unsteady. What? Evelyn lunged wildly. Lies! All lies! I evaded smoothly. Your firm's bankrupt, $1.8 million loan default, IRS debt $450,000. You skimmed $750,000. Case number TX4789. Guests circulated copies hurriedly, whispers turning to shouts. Chaos ensued, indignant cries, hasty exits. Evelyn fled the stage, her denials drowned out, the crowd turning against her. I stepped down, legs weak, and hugged Caleb tightly amid the turmoil. I'm sorry, but I couldn't let her diminish you again. He wept openly into my shoulder. Is it true, Mom? Yes, every word. The hall emptied rapidly, dreams shattered like glass underfoot, but truth, raw and liberating, prevailed at last. That night, no celebration, just hollow echoes in the vacant space, chairs askew, candles flickering unattended. Guests fled in waves, tables abandoned with half-eaten plates cooling, flowers drooping wiltedly. Caleb sat stunned in a corner chair, head bowed, Amelia sobbing quietly beside him, shoulders shaking. Harlan confronted Evelyn in a far alcove, her denials crumbling under his quiet fury. She vanished soon after, slipping out a side door like a shadow fleeing light. I approached Caleb slowly, kneeling despite aching knees. He looked up, eyes raw and red-rimmed. Why, Mom? Why now? To protect your dignity, your future. You ruined everything, our day. No, she did, years ago with her lies. I just illuminated them. He stormed off, needing space, the door slamming softly behind him. Amelia neared hesitantly, mascara-streaked cheeks, dress wrinkled from clutching. Is it all real? Yes, heartbreakingly. She collapsed into my arms, wailing softly. My mom's a stranger, a complete lie. I held her close, stroking her hair. Not your fault, sweet girl. Harlan, shattered and pale, took his envelope with trembling hands. I suspected, deep down, but this? He laughed with relatives supporting him, the weight visible. Alone in my car much later, night air cool through the cracked window, stars sharp overhead, I sobbed unrestrained for Caleb's raw pain, Amelia's shattered innocence, the wreckage scattered like confetti. Had I chosen right? The cost was steep, a wound that might scar forever. Weeks dragged endlessly, each day heavier. Caleb ignored my calls, texts unread. Media exploded relentlessly, headlines screaming Evelyn's fraud, families suing over botched deals they'd trusted her with. Victims thanked me anonymously through notes or calls, voices grateful amid tears. The board fast-tracked probes. Evelyn faced mounting charges, her empire crumbling publicly. Amelia called one rainy afternoon, thunder rumbling distantly. Thanks for the truth, it freed me, even through the pain. Her mother had divorced Harlan swiftly, who moved out quietly. I'm meeting Haley soon, nervous but necessary. Give Caleb time to heal. We parted with shared sorrow, a bond forged in fallout. Caleb reached out after 2 agonizing months. Mom, forgive me for the anger. We met at home, he hugged me tight, tears wetting my shoulder. You saved us from years of poison. Amelia joined soon, eyes brighter despite lingering sadness, announcing a small remarriage. No lies, no pretense this time, just us. They wed intimately months later, close ones only, at a sun-dappled park gazebo, wildflowers blooming wildly, laughter genuine, real joy bubbling freely. Dancing slowly with Caleb under string lights, much simpler than before, he whispered against my ear, "Truth builds stronger foundations, Mom, ones that last." Peace finally settled deep in my bones, warm and enduring. Evelyn's trial came swiftly. I testified calmly, evidence irrefutable. She got 10 years for embezzlement, her pleas falling on deaf ears. Victims reclaimed portions of funds, rebuilding slowly. Amelia visited her occasionally, finding gradual closure. Forgiveness for my own sake, to move forward unburdened. Years on, their family grew beautifully, a daughter, Nora, with Caleb's thoughtful eyes. Life balanced restoratively. Evelyn died isolated in prison, her empire reduced to dust and regret. But we thrived, rooted in honesty, love blooming where lies once choked. That night at the wedding echoed back often, the orchid's sweet scent, the light's soft glow, the sting of betrayal. But now, years later, it closed a full circle of healing, scars faded to wisdom. And in the end, truth always liberates the worthy, setting us free to live fully. If you faced similar betrayal, share in the comments, what would you have done? And if stories like mine move you, subscribe to the channel and stay for more. We're in this together.